systems around the world face a triple challenge of providing food security and nutrition to a growing global population, providing livelihood to those along the food chain, and contributing to the environment's sustainability. As we navigate the complex landscape of climate negotiation, it is increasingly evident that agriculture and food systems hold a pivotal role in the solution. We commend the recognition of food security and nutrition in the COP28 UAE Declaration on Sustainable Agriculture, Resilient Food and System, and Climate Action that was approved on December 1st. The understanding that we do not only need to feed the world, but to nourish people with nutrient-dense food is important. And there is actually a role to play in animal source food for that. We could have presented you like specific example of action undertaken by the livestock sector to enhance its sustainability and reduce its impact on climate change. But there's a numerous sessions and panels on climate action during the COP28. So if you're looking for any specific dairy, you can contact us at any time during the event or after the event, and be more than happy to share any information. Or you can also attend another official side event on sustainable livestock on December 8, 6:30, room 7. You will actually have more examples on climate as well. So a critical facet often overlooked in assessing the ecological footprint of food is the profound impact of nutrition. Acknowledging the nutritional aspect is essential, not only for the physical health of individuals, but also for the resilience and sustainability of communities and nations. The session today will explore the interaction between nutrition, food security, and climate action. We have a great program for you today, and starting with FAO work on livestock and the role of sustainable livestock food and nutrition, the first two speakers are participating from Rome, and the other speaker will be there in person today. We will also have a perspective from Africa, Latin America, and India, and the third party will present an example of climate action and nutrition with Danone, and we'll leave the last word to our young farmer representative. This session envisioned outcome hold great promises in fostering meaningful progress. By raising awareness about the complexity of sustainability dimensions and facilitating exchange of data and knowledge on the role of animal source food in ensuring nutrition security. As we delve into the intrinsic relationship between agri-food system, climate change, and nutrition security, it's crucial to acknowledge that addressing this complexity requires a balanced approach. While considering trade-offs and synergy, it is essential to recognize that action taken on one domain can have significant impact on others. For instance, strategies aiming at mitigating climate change in agri-food system might unintentionally affect nutrition security or vice versa. Therefore, a comprehensive understanding of this interaction are pivotal to devise on sustainable solutions. The question of global issue of malnutrition is also important. It's encompassing undernutrition, but also obesity and micronutrition deficiency. It's a pervasive effect on health and development, and economies necessitate a multifaceted approach to address both immediate and long-term implications. By acknowledging the nuanced nature of nutrient-dense needs across different population life stage, we can foster dietary inclusiveness while emphasizing the importance of nutrient-rich food, including territorial animal source food, and in promoting overall health and well-being. Furthermore, advocating on holistic approach that involves collaboration among various stakeholders is key. Recognizing the interconnectedness of social, economic, and environmental aspects in livestock farming underscores the need for inclusive and cooperative effort. By integrating diverse perspectives and experience, we can develop comprehensive strategies that not only ensure nutrition security, but also promote the sustainability of agri-food system in the face of climate change challenges. So our first speaker today will actually provide us welcoming remarks, and it is Ambassador Carlos Cherniak, who is the permanent representative of Argentina at the FAO, IFAN, and WFP since 2019. He is the chairperson of the COAG subcommittee on livestock. And previously, he was chair of the G27 China-Rome chapter. He is a lawyer and professor. We welcome you, Ambassador Cherniak.
Good afternoon, good night, depends on where you are. I would like to commence my thanking the International Dairy Federation for inviting me to participate with this notable panel of experts in this extremely important side event, which fortunately takes place in the context of the COP28. Almost 2 years ago, when I was honored with the chairmanship of the subcommittee on livestock, I highlighted the necessity to assess livestock systems from an integral perspective that permit FAO and policymakers to sharply identify the strengths and weaknesses of animal production in different contexts and regions. In this spirit, hand in hand with the title of this very activity, we should welcome the publication of FAO's reports on the contribution of terrestrial animal source food to healthy diets for improved nutrition and health outcomes, since its science-based content, among other elements, clearly indicates that terrestrial animal source foods provide higher quality proteins than other foods. The consumption of TASF, albeit deficient in developing countries, has been shown to counteract the effects of anti-nutrients found in plant-based food. Milk and dairy products intake by school-age children and adolescents increases height and reduces overweight and obesity. In short, it is evident that animal proteins are vital and at the same time irreplaceable to guarantee improved nutrient status, enhance human immune systems, and promote healthy physical and cognitive growth, in particular within pregnant and breastfeeding women, infants, children, adults, and other adults. In parallel, it is also important to recognize that the trade-offs between animal farming and sustainability should be further addressed to demonstrate how this critical sector is making efforts to adapt to climate change. I am not saying that there is nothing to improve. On the contrary, I am just highlighting that responsible producers around the world are introducing technology, biotechnology, and holistic approaches to enhance the interface that links production, natural resources, and food security. Additionally, I would like to emphasize the need to consider the role of livestock systems, livestock schemes, within the economic and social structures of developing countries. This activity not only contributes to healthy diets locally and regionally, but also represents a critical source of income for livelihood and a tool to achieve economic development. That is to say, livestock production is a multidimensional lever to achieve the Agenda 2030, and we must protect it. Throughout the deliberation of our distinguished panelists, hopefully, we will learn how we can create consciousness on the need to promote sustainable consumption patterns. What are the alternatives to augment our joint efforts to enhance sustainability within livestock systems? And of course, how we can keep ensuring food safety of animal source food, including within international trade. Approximately 2 months ago, FAO organized the first global conference on sustainable livestock. In parallel to this conference, a forum of young livestock producers and professionals was held with many of the individuals working in the dairy field. In my capacity as president of the Livestock Subcommittee, I took the initiative to have a meeting with them, and our conversation was actually amazing. At the end, I asked them why they had decided to commit to agricultural and livestock activities. Their response was a very strong message that I would like to share with all of you. The young people said, we decided to commit to livestock farming because we are not only the future, we are the present. And we know that livestock production is part of the solution, particularly in a world where global food insecurity is a scandal. I think that this is a strong message by the youth, isn't it? So, my dear colleagues, I invite you to actively engage in this stimulating session and be hearkening to the thought-provoking panel we have ahead. Wishing you an exciting event. I thank you very much for your attention. Good morning to all, good afternoon, good night. Thank you very much.
For your contribution. Now I would like to invite the contribution of Dr. Lynette Neufeld. She is the Director of the Food and Nutrition Division at FAO since early 22. Dr. Neufeld is President of the International Union of Nutrition Scientists, past Chair of the Micronutrient Forum Steering Committee, former board member of the American Society of Nutrition, and has been member of several WHO and other technical advisory groups. She has published over 150 peer-reviewed publications and book chapters and holds a master and PhD in international nutrition from Cornell University. So Dr. Neufeld, the floor is yours.
Thank you and good morning. Great. So I can't actually see the slides. I don't know if it's feasible for me to see that. Otherwise, oh, there we go. Perfect. Wonderful. Thank you. Great. So I'm going to tell you about a recent publication that was published in FAO. If you could move to the next slide, please. This document is the first of 4 component documents that were commissioned by the Committee on Agriculture, COAG, in 2020. So I'm going to speak only about the first document, but I think it's important to understand that this has been published in the context of a series that will look both at the health and nutrition outcomes related to animal source food consumption, which is what I'll present, but then also look at supply and demand considerations, production considerations, and ultimately bring all of that information together to look at the opportunities and trade-offs related to sustainable change in the livestock sector. Next slide, please. I'm going to quickly talk you through. It's a bit of a long presentation. First of all, I just want to let you know that this presentation is an independent report commissioned by FAO and led by an academic consultant with support from others, and we have no financial or other conflicts of interest to declare. So next slide, please. I'm going to speak very quickly through these different aspects and dwell a little bit more on some than others, just in the interest of time. Next slide, please. So I think you are all familiar, next slide, with the global nutrition situation. But I did want to remind you, as has already been mentioned through the introduction, of the fact that for several of the global nutrition targets, we are not currently on track. And what you can see here is the progress towards several, as well at which is 2020 towards 2025, but also the projection of those targets up to 2030 to align with the Sustainable Development Goals. And as you can see, we really have to accelerate progress, particularly around stunting, wasting, and control of the spread of young child overweight and obesity if we are to reach those targets. Next slide, please. At the same time, we know that micronutrient deficiency affects all world regions. And although there are important gaps in the data to understand that completely, what we can see here is the prevalence of at least one deficiency of 3 micronutrients that were assessed among women of reproductive age. And what you can see that even at the global level, it's well over 60%. But even in high-income countries, there's a very high prevalence of deficiency of at least one vitamin or mineral. Next slide, please. So we also know that there has been an increasing trend in the availability of animal source foods in most of the world regions, and a little bit of a difference in tendency between the type of animal source foods. You can see more about all of these details in the report. I'm skipping very quickly over them. Next slide, please. But we also know that there's extreme disparity in the access and consumption of different kinds of animal source foods across the globe. And what you can see in this slide is an average in the gray bar, but then the variation between that among the poorest and the wealthiest with the lines. And you can see for dairy, for animal products, and for eggs, you can see that that disparity exists across all categories of animal source foods. Next slide, please. So we know that there are many bioactive components in animal source foods, micronutrients, macronutrients, very high quality protein, and several micronutrients such as zinc, which is a critical element. We'll look at some of the functions of these later. Omega-3 fatty acids, vitamin B12, calcium, and others. Many of those are also contained in plant foods, but there are differences in their bioavailability or the extent to which the human body can readily absorb and utilize them. And of course, for vitamin B12, that is actually a nutrient that is contained only in animal source foods. Next slide, please. In this slide, you can see some of the factors that influence the nutrient content of animal source foods. So this is one of the challenges that we have, is that feeding systems, stock, livestock breed, production environment, all influence the nutrient content. So they're important when we come to those reports related to the production systems and looking at that. This will be an important element for us to be considering. Next slide, please. So looking at a bit of a review of the sources of the types of animal source foods and the critical nutrients in the diet. I'm not going to read through all of this, but you can see on the bottom half of this slide each of the nutrients and the purpose of that nutrient and its function across a variety of human bodily functions, such as growth and development among children, during pregnancy, cognitive development, even among adults, bone health, normal functionings of enzymes and the immune system. There are a variety of functions of those nutrients, and in the upper half, we've categorized those on the content of those nutrients, both by the colors of the dots and the size of the dots, just as a little bit of a visual, and I'll leave that with you to study in more detail in the report. Next slide, please. So let's look at some of the health effects. Again, I'm not going to dwell on the details here, but it's important to remember that the critical importance of each of these nutrients and the quantity of those nutrients that you need is dependent on the life stage. During pregnancy and lactation, when the fetus is growing, and then during lactation when mother is producing breast milk, in infants and young children, when they are growing fast and the quantity of food that they consume is small, the density of the nutrients or the quantity of the nutrients that is contained in the kinds of foods that we eat is vitally important to ensure that all of those needs are met. So again, I will leave you with the report to go into the details of that. Next slide, please. So let's look at some of the associations of benefits with animal source food consumption. And as has been mentioned, dairy, there is substantial evidence found for the positive effect of health outcomes across varying life stages, including in pregnant women, increased birth weight of offspring, in school-age children and adolescents related to their growth and an association with lower rates of overweight and obesity. Among adults, a lower risk of all-cause mortality, hypertension, etc. You can see all of those. And then for older adults, a lower risk of several negative outcomes that are associated with elder age, such as dementia, fragility, sarcopenia, and fractures. For eggs, there is a positive effect of women during reproductive age in terms of their nutrient intake. And in children, there is some evidence in some contexts that consumption of eggs can help increase linear growth. For meat, there is evidence of improved iron status in adults and evidence for older adults in particularly in high-income countries where these studies have been done, on the consumption of lean red meat and improved muscle health. Next slide, please. Importantly, the report also looks into the evidence for health risks. And what we see, quite consistent evidence on processed red meat, that even low levels of consumption can elevate the risks of mortality and chronic disease outcomes, including cardiovascular disease and colorectal cancer. Related to unprocessed red meats, the consumption of modest amounts, ranging in, according to the studies that were reviewed, between 9 and 71 grams, may have minimal risk, considering safe, and is considered safe regarding chronic disease outcomes. Again, the important factor there is that it is unprocessed meat, and there is an upper limit in the amount of consumption that this lower risk associates to. For risks for other types of animal source foods, there is a mix of inconclusive evidence, for example, in the case of milk, and then some non-significant results in terms of the consumption of eggs on blood cholesterol and the consumption of poultry in association with stroke. So again, some important evidence gaps that do require additional study in terms of risks. Next slide, please. So next slide, I'm going to go very quickly through these just to remind us that it is very important also to think about the important considerations related to food safety and the critical importance of animal source food as a perishable product and the risks that can be associated with that, which obviously imply a need for careful management of animal source foods in the context of One Health. Next slide, please. I'm just going to skip over this quickly. The next slide talks about some of those biological and chemical hazards. I will leave you that to go into in detail. Next slide, please. So again, the One Health approach is really our way to manage and to mitigate those risks related to those preventable risks, both in terms of the production system and the means of production, as well as in the means of across the food value chains, all the way to preparation and consumption by humans. Next slide, please. So very last slide. In the review, we also looked at the current state of policy documents related to recommendations about animal source food consumption. Primarily, we reviewed food-based dietary guidelines, but also some documents and recommendations related to non-communicable disease prevention. The recommendations primarily are linked to micronutrient consumption in terms of consuming small quantities or some quantity of animal source foods to ensure adequate micronutrient intake. But there are also some recommendations related to consumption to mitigate the risks of non-communicable diseases. Environmental sustainability considerations in terms of animal source food consumption were included in 6 food-based dietary guidelines from middle-income countries, and animal welfare considerations were also brought into the Danish and the Swedish food-based dietary guidelines in relation to food labeling. So this mentioning that this is an important opportunity to provide relevant context-specific recommendations that bring in all of this evidence to bear in advising households and communities around animal source food consumption based on that evidence. And there's a lot of room, there's a lot there, but there's a lot of room for improvement to ensure that that evidence is brought to bear in the recommendations that are provided in country-specific contexts. Next slide, please. Again, I will skip over this. There are several important emerging areas that are also covered in the document, such as the increased consumption of new types of animal source foods, insects, for example, as well as some review of animal source food alternatives. And there's also a highlight that there's quite important gaps across meats that are outside of the beef and poultry including sheep and wild meats and goats and insects, and etc. There are a lot of important gaps in that regard. Next slide, please. Okay, so I will leave you with these key messages. There is a vital contribution to meeting global nutrient needs and therefore nutrition targets, but there are important inequities in consumption. There are essential nutrients that are highly bioavailable, and there is robust evidence for certain phases of life of the importance of dairy and milk, meat and eggs, but important gaps exist for others. Next slide, please. It's important to always consider the food safety concerns and potential risks and bring those into regulation. And policies and programs and legislative framework, as we've mentioned, and particularly food-based dietary guidelines, are an important opportunity to bring these evidence to bear. And fundamentally important, we must, to do that accurately, we must bring in quantitative recommendations that ensure that we have a proper balance between that promote those opportunities and those benefits and mitigate any risks associated. So I think that's my last slide. We can go to the next, but I think that's the last one. And I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Neufeld. So our next speaker is Mrs. Nabukolo Kovic. She is from Zambia. She is ILRI Director General Representative to Ethiopia. From 2015 to 2021, she served as Senior Research Coordinator at IFPRI for a CGRA program on agriculture for nutrition and health, and worked on projects in several countries, including Ethiopia, Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, and Zambia. She has worked extensively with the government of Ethiopia and other stakeholders, including the Ethiopian Public Health Institute, the Ministry of Health, and the Ministry of Agriculture and Development Agency on different fronts of food system and nutrition, including the development of food-based dietary guidelines and their adaptation to pastoralist setting in Ethiopia. So the floor is yours, Namukolo.
Thank you very much. In my presentation, I concentrate on the role of livestock to feed vulnerable populations in Africa. Next slide. Here, really what I want to see is why we are here. It is a climate summit. You can see the photos in there. We are in trouble. And within this context, we need to do better. And livestock then needs to be considered as part of the solution when we're looking at mitigation, adaptation, resilience, as part of mechanisms that people, animals, and the planet need to use to overcome the challenges posed by climate. So I am framing my presentations within the climate crisis that we face. Next slide. You have heard from Lynette about the difficulties of hunger on the planet. And here I draw your attention to Africa. And you can see that both severe and moderate food insecurity, if you compare Africa to the other areas of the world, you can see that the yellow and orange take a much bigger proportion of the circle, implying that there is a much bigger challenge on hunger on the African continent. What you don't see in that slide is the hidden hunger, the micronutrients. Those numbers will be even bigger and cover a much bigger space of that green circle. Next slide. And then this is the high-level panel of expert conceptual framework looking at drivers of change on food systems transformation, plenty of entry points to do different things. I just want to reflect the complexity here that requires different food systems actors identifying entry points, but with a common vision that should take us to the right direction. Next slide. Just to say we need a common vision there. And then I want to use Ethiopia as an example and framing it around food systems transformation. This is the vision that was developed in Ethiopia for their food systems transformation pathway that was submitted to the UN Food System. What I want you to is the holistic nature of the vision. They want a holistic transformation that promotes enhanced food safety, nutrition and diets, improved livelihoods, greater land preservation and restoration, and greater resilience to shocks and stresses. So climate and environment is a big focus. They also seek to transform food systems using sustainable and healthy diet-centered lens that minimizes trade-offs through calling for strong collaboration across food systems actors, uniting around a common goal of healthy and sustainable diets for all. And the images on the right there is simply to show you that livestock is one of the areas that are being considered as part of that integrated food systems transformation process. Next slide. Here I want to reflect the need for inclusivity. And these are actually tweets that I took from Save the Children a year ago. And really the idea here is livestock were dying in the Horn of Africa on the left there. And you can see the lamentations. The lamentation is on how am I going to feed my children? So the association is very strongly with, if all my livestock die, what am I going to feed my children? And what that brings into the context of food systems transformation is that there are settings where livestock must be a part of the transformation process, and we need to think about what are the sustainable solutions that are relevant in those contexts. Next slide. And here I drill further into the food systems transformation pathway of Ethiopia that has got 6 clusters. You can see how they are associated with the 5 action tracks of the African Union. The first cluster talks about ensuring availability and accessibility of safe nutrient-dense foods. Lynette has spoken about animal source foods that high bioavailability is critical in a context of little. So if it's just a little bit of animal source food that you can actually access in your context, that bioavailability becomes extremely important, but safety is also important. Cluster 2 looks at sustainable and equitable consumption, healthy, safe, and nutrients-dense diets throughout the life cycle. And included in this cluster are food-based dietary guidelines where they've actually included amounts of different animal source foods that could be used. It's not in excess. It's looking at those healthy relevance that Lynette spoke about to talk about what is actually needed. Again, the question is, to provide those foods within those contexts, what is the sustainable approach? And then boosting nature positive perspective in this cluster on integrated policy and system to promote agricultural transformation. For livestock, in that cluster, they talk about regenerative production practices. And across those practices, it's integration of livestock in mixed crop livestock systems that can actually bring sustainability, but also address issues of soil health, issues of land degradation. So essentially, it's integrating livestock as part of the package of food systems transformation. In Cluster 5 on access to market, they are looking at context-specific market solutions that bring livestock products to urban centers, but also within the rural setting as well. And then on cluster 6, they are looking at mainstreaming risk and protecting the poor. And included in here is the livestock-based index, an index-based livestock insurance program to help in those contexts I showed you earlier, where livestock is the predominant livelihood, without which even the grains will not come into the area, because that's the income, that's where the income comes from. Next slide. Just to say to you that context matters, and in different contexts, what you do is different. And our challenge as the Livestock Research Institute and the partners we work with is to actually work to see what those sustainable solutions would be under different contexts. Next slide. And then, of course, a One Health approach is critical even in these settings. And specifically, we know that for the African continent, we still obtain 70% of our fresh foods from informal markets. So when we speak about food safety and One Health, we need to think in terms of what is relevant to informal sectors as well. Codex Alimentarius doesn't help those settings. We need to think about something different. So the International Livestock Research Institute, we are working with the African Union, the African Union Commission, the African Union Development Agency, NEPAD, to develop food safety guidelines for informal markets. And that's taking into account that if you think in terms of animal source foods, or even fruits and vegetables for that matter, in fresh markets, food safety is a challenge, but the challenges need different types of solutions to what you would get in formal markets. Next slide. Here I want to present what I often call my slide of hope. And this is my slide of hope for the African continent, informed by the UN Food Systems Summit, in that multiple 42 African countries submitted pathways. Many of them have visions similar to the one that I showed you for Ethiopia, which will be very difficult to attain with animal source foods completely excluded. And so within that context, we need to look at the country food systems pathways. And then what the African Union has done is looked at the common threads across different country pathways and incorporated and looked at what are the common threads and developed an Africa common position. Some of our livestock issues on the continent cross borders. So our livestock, yeah, they just walk across the border, and we have semi-nomadic communities that are moving around. How do we incorporate that kind of situation in our transformation efforts? And then at the same time, Lynette spoke about guidelines and how important they are, the food-based dietary guidelines. Out of the 54 African Union member states, only 9 currently have food-based dietary guidelines. Majority of those countries are not even happy with what they have produced, except maybe for the 2 that have done them in the last couple of years. Why do I look at that as an opportunity of hope? For me, it is an opportunity of hope because the rest of the countries will be developing their guidelines in the context of heightened attention to sustainable food systems transformation. And so we have an opportunity to inform the pathways that we are trying to implement, the policy perspective, but also how we move forward to sustainability to address the nutrition challenges that we face. And then we have the vision for adapted crops and soils, Within that, although it focuses on crops, we recognize the fact that the crop rotation systems in mixed crop livestock systems will have to integrate livestock in some ways. So we need, at country level, to figure out how we actually do that. Next slide. So how do we then move forward? What I am indicating here is that we need to strive for sustainability and synergy. We should not think of livestock as an isolated agricultural entity. We need to make livestock part of a regenerative production practice landscape. We must ensure that sustainability and climate mitigation is central. And here, I just want to bring you one element. In the dairy sector in Ethiopia, we are celebrating the fact that we have improved productivity from 1.5 liters of milk per cow on average to 2 liters. It's a big percentage in terms of improvements. But if you consider that we can go to 10 liters per day or 20 liters per day, our greenhouse gas emission intensities are huge on those low productivity levels. So one of our first lines of defense in terms of addressing greenhouse gas emissions is getting our cows to produce 10 liters of milk instead of 1, because the costs of feeding one cow to produce 1 liter in terms of greenhouse gas emissions is pretty high. So context, again, really matters. So we must address greenhouse gas emission, and within our context, what we need to do is different. So again, the International Livestock Research Institute, we are doing some work on greenhouse gas emissions in these contexts. First, just to try and estimate what they look like in different settings, but also looking at combinations of pastures. We host the CGIAR's Feeds and Forages Gene Bank, and so we have the opportunity to look at what is available there and look at feeding combinations that could contribute towards also reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And so what we need to do, and what I ask everybody to do in this room, is engage proactively with sustainable food systems transformation efforts that are being made towards incorporating and integrating livestock as part of sustainable food systems transformation on the African continent, taking context into account. Thank you.
Run. I need to do anything? Not working? Working.
There is a big change. This year, dry spell was low. We end up getting no feeds.
Relationship of milk with camels, they cannot do without. Climate change, it's affecting a lot. Sometimes you go for 2 weeks without water. Farmers are very important people to me because without them, I have no business.
Dairy farming is good, but it has challenges. There is a big change.
Okay, I think that was just a teaser. So we encourage you to go to the BBC to see the full video. So let's go now to our next speaker. We are on time in terms of lineup, so that's great. So Mr. Lloyd Day is a United States citizen and assumed his position as Deputy Director General of the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation in Agriculture, IICA, on July 1st of 2012. He started his career with the governor of California and eventually became the Deputy Secretary of International Trade and Investment for California. Moved to Washington, D.C. to serve as administrator for USDA, Agriculture Marketing Service, head of Federal Government Affairs at Syngenta, and then now Deputy Director of IICA. Mr. Day has received a bachelor degree and master degree from Central University and University of Glasgow. So, Lloyd, the floor is yours.
Well, merci. Thank you very much, Caroline. It's a pleasure to be back with the International Dairy Federation. I was with you in Chicago about a month ago or 2 months ago. There's been a lot of travel in between, but it was a real pleasure to be around thousands of dairy farmers from around the world. I want to start by thanking you for your leadership in this sector. I also want to thank Ambassador Cherniak, if he's still with us, for his leadership in Rome in helping articulate the important attributes of livestock to the Committee on Food Security and all the food agencies in Rome. What I thought I'd start by doing is telling you a little bit about IICA, because I don't know that everyone knows who we are. We're the Inter-American Institute for Cooperation on Agriculture. We were founded 81 years ago by a gentleman named Henry Wallace, who was the Secretary of Agriculture of the United States, and also is responsible for a huge innovation in the 1920s called hybrid corn. And hybrid corn combined with fertilizer and the tractor revolutionized agriculture. And that led to Norman Borlaug and the Green Revolution, and eventually to today, where I think there's a huge amount of innovation coming in a variety of different fields, from digital agriculture to precision ag to life sciences, that's going to change agriculture, and I'm excited about it. Some context of why an Inter-American Institute is here at the COP28, and a lot of it began in 2019 when we had the visit of the UN One Planet Network to IICA to talk about the transformation of food systems. It was great to have the whole world kind of like this come to our headquarters to talk about food systems transformation, but we had a concern because there wasn't a single farmer, there wasn't a single food company, and there wasn't a single Minister of Agriculture, who are our bosses, so we were concerned. And then following that, there was a launch of a report by a think tank in Europe that called for the reduction of animal-based protein by about 50%. And so we started thinking we need to do something to, one, look at this sector, and two, work with our ministers of agriculture, because agriculture is a huge component of any economy. And I look out on this room and I see a young farmer from Canada over there, a cattle rancher, and then from Brazil, another young farmer as well. And you think about the Americas, from Canada to Argentina, 34 member states that comprise my member states. Animal agriculture is a huge component of that. Dairy is a huge component of that. This contributes to livelihoods of the people that are our members, but also to nutrition and to health for the billions of consumers around the world that benefit from their productivity. So we started working with the livestock sector, and many of them are here in this room. I see some friendly faces. And I attended the Global Agenda on Sustainable Livestock, and I don't know where, I see Michael's hat over there, so Michael was there with me recently, but I went to the one in Kansas State first. And there were a whole bunch of folks talking about all the attributes of livestock that we just heard about from the ambassador and the FAO and from ILRI. And my concern is that we were just talking to each other. So we needed to talk outside, and then COVID hit. So what do? And thank God for Zoom, and thank God for technology that enabled us to have discussions across the hemisphere to discuss this and how can we promote the importance of livestock and the livestock sector to human health and to economics and to the general population. Well, as we started doing that, along came the Food Systems Summit, which was just yet another opportunity for us to promote the importance of agriculture in general, but livestock in particular. And that led to our, that led to our participation in the COP 27 and now the COP28, where somewhere over there, I think, that way, in the Food and Ag Pavilion, you can find the home of sustainable agriculture of the Americas, where we have farmers and ranchers and NGOs and ministers and the private sector coming together to talk about the important attributes of agriculture as part of the solution to our climate challenges. During this whole process, our Argentine Director General put forward three principal points. First is that farmers need to be a part of these discussions, that their contribution to our health, our nutrition, our society needs to be valued. The second is that science, and we heard a lot of science here, science, not political science, not ideology, not aspiration, science and evidence needs to be the foundation for any kind of public policy by governments or international organizations. And the third is that agriculture ought to be viewed as part of the solution. And I think we've heard some of the elements of that in the previous discussions about how livestock is part of the solution. But there's many things that are happening in the livestock sector, across the multiple sectors within livestock itself, in which farmers and companies are reducing our emissions. And that's an exciting thing. Agriculture is a sector in which we can reduce our emissions and where we can actually sequester carbon. And a lot of that comes from livestock. Now, I was asked to talk about school feeding programs. And, you know, I have a lot of stats on the nutrition elements and aspects of milk, of dairy, of beef, but I think a lot of that was covered in a previous presentation and in a very elegant and descriptive way, so I don't think I'll get into that, but I'll talk a little bit about the fact that school feeding is a really excellent opportunity for any country to have a real impact on child development and growth. Not just physical growth, but cognitive growth. Because in many countries in the world, and even in developed countries, for the poor, that school lunch is their meal. And so an investment in school lunch in a variety of different areas around the world, I think is vital. Add to that the component of the livestock sector and of local agriculture and locally sourced foods, and working together, governments, the private sector, international organizations. Cindy McCain was here. I don't know what day she was here, but it may have been yesterday, it may have been earlier in the week. I think it's Tuesday today. I think for those of us who are coming from the Americas, we're a little jet lagged and confused as to what day it is, especially since we didn't have a weekend here. But I had a meeting with Cindy McCain of the World Food Program. And you know, if the World Food Program could help in school feeding programs and help in the development of locally sourced animal nutrients from dairy, beef, pork, chicken, eggs into those programs, the economic development impact could be profound. And then you expand that into getting governments and ministries of agriculture and others to do that, it could have a real significant impact, not just in the nutrition of children, but also in the development of those economies that are benefiting from livestock. Now, there's lots of statistics in the world about livestock and about dairy and about pasture and about other things, and which statistics are true, I don't know. But I'll just say this, 1 billion people in the world, 1 billion people owe their livelihoods to livestock. I won't say dairy, I think the dairy folks would say just dairy. I'll just say livestock. So you think about that, 1 in 8 human beings is somehow associated with the dairy and livestock sectors. Probably add that significantly once you go beyond dairy. So we're talking a huge chunk of the world depends on an animal for their economic livelihood. That's important. Not only that, they're contributing to the human health of all the rest of us. And the nutritional aspects of all sorts of animal source proteins are well known, well documented, based on evidence, based on science. We need to have more of them, not less. And we need to do it in a way that's more sustainable, and we know that we can do that. I was pleased when I went to another high-level meeting. Everything's a high-level meeting. But there were some really high-level people here at this meeting, including the Crown Prince of the Netherlands and a guy named Bill Gates, who some people love, some people hate. But I was really pleased with what he said. First, he committed to research and science in the CGIAR program, and then other people started throwing more and more money at research and investment, which is important. But what Bill Gates talked about was the economic development aspects of just developing chicken and eggs in poor countries. And that not only helps them with nutrition, but it also helps them with gender-based economic development, then feeding their children either eggs and chickens and other aspects of that. The importance of animal agriculture is something that I don't think is as well known in global society as it is today, because it's the recipient of a lot of attacks from people. And so to conclude, I think it's really important that we understand meat and dairy are essential parts of health and nutrition at all ages. People focus on children and on women. It's important for all ages. Just one additional dairy serving in developed countries will help, achieve all the nutritious necessities of a healthy diet. School feeding programs are probably the best way to address some issues such as malnutrition, stunting, and other things that we saw in a previous slide. And then, there's a lot of questions about the cost of the food system on human health. Well, I would just kind of ask, what about the positive aspects of the food system on human health? What if we didn't have enough nutrition in order to be productive and to grow and to be prosperous and to contribute to society? I think that needs to be included in that kind of discussion. So with that, I think I see the gong is coming. I'm gonna close, but I want to thank you for the opportunity to tell the story of what we've been doing about the importance of livestock and of agriculture in Latin America as a whole. And I look forward to following sessions.
Presentation. So now we're moving continent. We're actually going to India. So Mrs. Smriti Singh is a postgraduate in sociology and management. She's been working for the National Dairy Development Board in India for the past 12 years and has worked extensively in formulating and strategizing dairy development intervention at national as well as regional levels. She has also been involved in feasibility and sustainability studies of the National Dairy Plan Phase 1, a World Bank funded project. Currently, she's leading the NDBB Foundation for Nutrition, which promotes school meal program as a tool to improve health and nutrition of school-going children and engage business entities across the country to contribute towards this cause as part of the corporate social responsibility. So Smriti, the floor is yours.
Role of dairying in nourishing 1 billion people. Now that is a very big question. Before I move to the topic, I would like to briefly talk about the journey of transformation of the Indian dairy sector. It's a story from deficiency to self-sufficiency, which would eventually establish how important the dairy sector is to India. In the early 50s, the Indian dairy sector was facing shortages and primarily dependent on import. The per capita availability, in fact, had declined to meager 112 grams per day. At that time, the Indian dairy sector was at nascent stage with low milk production, lack of processing facilities, and lack of connect between milk producers and market. What transformed the Indian dairy sector was conceptualization of a very structured program. National Dairy Development Board was set up in 1965, and the board conceptualized and implemented a very unique program, the Operation Flood. Operation Flood started in the year 1970 and was aimed at creating nationwide milk grid and also introducing productivity enhancement initiatives in India, which eventually led to India becoming self-sufficient in milk, and in 1998, we became the world's largest producer of milk. Now, I want to emphasize here that we are not just the world's largest producer, but also the largest consumer of milk. And just seeing the facts, the statistics, India is home to 1.4 billion people, and about 69% of them reside in rural areas. India continues to be the largest producer of milk, and the per capita availability has now reached to 444 grams per day, which is even larger than the world per capita availability of 315 grams. And of the total production of 221 million tons, 37% is consumed at the ground level, at the farmers, the producers level, which impact emphasize the role dairy is playing in their daily diet. And now the milk production has also grown many folds. It's growing at 6% over the past decade. And milk has turned to be the single largest commodity in India, so at $12 billion US, which is more than the combined value of cereal and pulses. Thank you. Next slide. Now the Indian dairy system is very unique in nature. For just like we have one of our speakers emphasizing, we have production. It is not the production, mass production, but production by masses. The average herd size is 2 and 3 animals. And it eventually provides livelihood to 80 million rural households. The Indian dairy, the distribution of animal is more equitable than of land. More than 80 million rural households are dependent on dairying. And the dairy cooperative, which was set up during Operation Flood and even continues to thrive, are the bedrock of the dairy cooperative sector as a whole in India. It covers around 220,000 villages, connecting 18 million milk producer members. So in Indian context, dairy plays 2 major roles. One is creating livelihoods at the ground level for the small and the marginal farmers, which comprise almost 81% of the rural farmers. And it also ensures nutritional security for the population across all age group. Next slide, please. Now, why milk? It has been already emphasized earlier, but in the Indian context, the Indian population is significantly lacto-vegetarian, and dairy forms a very important source of protein, or we can say the sole source of animal protein in their daily food. Milk is nutritionally complete, providing fat, proteins, essential minerals, enzymes, and in a balanced proportion and a bioavailable form. Some amino acids which are very essential at the growth year is available in milk. Milk also has the ability to address all the triple burden of malnutrition, undernutrition, micronutrient deficiency, and overweight, especially in case of children and lactating women. It also promotes health and immunity. Another very important factor is milk is an excellent source of medium for fortification. And in the Indian context, it can reach to masses because there is a lot of consumption of milk at the ground level. So the fortification of milk has the potential to reach masses to address the burden of micronutrient deficiency in the population. Further, there is no sensory change when we fortify milk, that is the taste and the flavor, there is no change. So acceptability among the consumer is also high. Then widening target population, we can reach to infants, adolescent girls, pregnant women, lactating women by fortifying milk and reducing the micronutrient deficiency. Further, the sustainability part, the investment involved in fortifying milk is negligible and it can be easily adoptable and sustainable in the long term. Now, although milk is there in India and we have milk production commensurate with the nutritional requirement of the population, but there are disparity in the purchasing power which makes the availability of milk non-uniform among the masses, especially children. Now, Government of India has introduced various structured programs ensuring availability of milk and product for needy segments, leading to nutritional security at the ground level. We have also requisite legislation in place for fortification of milk, especially in the area where there is nutritional deficiency. Milk fortification programs had been undertaken in the past. Next slide, please. Now, reaching to the children through various milk and milk programs. Now, one particular model is not feasible for all parts of India, since it's very diverse and reachability and is a problem in India. So we have state-level initiatives for distribution of milk and milk products to children under 5 through Anganwadi. Anganwadi are school children care centers where children below the age of 4 are there. Then we have, they get in terms of milk products once in a week or twice in a week. Then we have distribution of milk through midday meal schemes in some pockets, for example, Cheer Bhagya scheme. It is a school milk program in Karnataka where we are reaching to 1 million students in school as well as in Anganwadi centers, the rural child care centers. Then there is another program, Gift Milk Program. It is an NDDB's initiative to promote nutrition support to children from economically weaker section and through milk and other nutritious product. NDDB founded NDDB Foundation for Nutrition in 2015, and the primary objective was to promote consumption of milk and milk product among children and to provide nutritional support to children through milk and milk products and thereby address their nutritional status. It also has an aim to promote ecological and sustainable models of agriculture and allied activities to enhance the nutritional security of household. In addition to it, NDDB had also started a Sishu Sanjeevani program. It is an energy-dense fortified nutritional supplement, especially for the small children aged 3 to 6. It is a protein-rich supplement comprising almost 18 grams of protein and providing 508 kilocalories of energy per 100 gram. It almost fulfills 1/3 recommended dietary allowance of all the essential micronutrients required for children aged 3 to 6. This is a new program being promoted at rural childcare centers by NDDB. Under its Gift Milk program, NDDB is supplying 200 ml of flavored fortified milk. It is fortified with vitamin A and D to government school children, preferably girl school. How it is different from the existing program is, existing other programs which are being undertaken in India is that we try to reach to highly distant, marginalized communities, geographically very difficult communities, and we focus on the vulnerable section. We are targeting the government school children who mainly come from the socially weaker section, economically weaker section, and we engage local communities, local private and public enterprise for funding the program. This program is not funded by the government. We engage the local industries which are available in the area under their corporate social responsibility to fund the program. And how do we supply milk and ensure the quality? We take support of the vast network of dairy cooperatives that is present in each and every nook and corner of the country for supply of the milk to the schools. Now, this also has a twin benefit, especially in the areas where it's difficult to reach to the consumer in difficult terrains. These cooperatives and the milk producer get an assured market in terms of your school milk program. So that serves, enhancing the farmers at the rural level in these pockets, and also giving, feeding the children in these areas. Now we have almost distributed 2.9 million liters of fortified flavored milk under the program, and covered almost 0.1 million students, 80% comprising from economically weaker section, and 50% beneficiaries are girl child. We did one impact study in one of the program areas in Latehar, Jharkhand. This is a purely tribal area, very streamlined they are not very into the mainstream of the general terms. So we implemented Gift Milk program there, and we did a study after 2 years of intervention. Now some of the important benefits that we saw in terms of, there were 7% decrease in the number of stunted children. 24% of the children had better IQ when compared from the control schools. The attendance in the school increased, which eventually, goes a great way to, secure the future of the children. We had healthier children. Children reporting illness in past 24 hours has decreased considerably in these schools. And there were also improved levels of serum and vitamin B12 and calcium levels in these students. So through the Gift Milk program, we are addressing, various sustainable development goals, no poverty. We are assuring markets for the producer where there was very little market. We're again, going towards zero hunger, good health and well-being for the children. Gender equality, we are focusing on the girls and vulnerable groups, and reduce inequalities. We're also going for partnership for goals. We are engaging the local communities, the private and the public industries to fund these programs so it does not add a burden to the government and yet ensure nutritional security at the ground level. Nourishing 1 billion people responsibly is the way forward. Now we know that India, we are a smallholder system, and then we need to, paving way for sustainable dairying. One is the first way we are saying is to improve the productivity of the existing herd, and we are doing it through ration balancing program. In this program, we are using the locally feed resources and area-specific mineral mixture to reduce the productivity of the animal. It reduces the feeding cost, and there is reduction in methane emission by 10 to 15%, and which also leads to enhanced dairy incomes at the ground level. Next slide, please. Now coming to, for smallholder dairy system in India, decentralized anaerobic digestion of dung promises to be the most efficient way to avoid methane emission. It has the potential to fulfill 50% of India's LPG requirement and 40% of India's nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium need. In this, the farmers are incentivized to install biogas plants at the backyard, and the biogas is used in the kitchen instead of fossil fuel like firewood or LPG. So it is a small model created at the ground level, at the household level, and it adds to, sustainable dairying, way for sustainable dairying. Now the slurry generated is used by the farmers in the field or aggregated, and organic fertilizers are made out of it. We are also introducing dung-based large capacity biogas plants, to fulfill the power needs of the dairy plant. Now, our emphasis is not only to bring this initiative at the ground at the farmer level. We are trying to bring sustainable model across the dairy value chain, and thus we have introduced this energy in dairy value chain, solar energy in dairy value chain, where solarizing the village level dairy cooperative societies, milk chilling plants and processing with the help of solar PV and solar thermal energy. We are using concentrated solar thermal technology across the dairy plant to minimize their energy cost. Now, this is a small success story of Nilgiris. In this project, we are also taking the gift milk program, and we have also helped the farmers to set up dairy solar plants, biogas plants at their village level, which in turn is reaching to their kitchens for meeting their cooking needs. So this is the whole model. We are getting milk from the farmers, which goes to the dairy. From dairy, it goes to the school. And again, the farmers are putting up biogas in their plants, which in turn is fulfilling their cooking needs. So I'll just end. We are, trying to nourish 1 billion people, sustainability and looking at the nutritional security in the country as a balancing act between responsible use of natural resources on one hand and nutritional benefits which the dairy provides to the million of dairy farmers on the other hand. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Smriti. Next speaker is Mrs. Janet Comlanot. She is the lead Danone's external relations for sustainability topic. In this role, she builds strategies, partnership, and initiatives that help drive transformation within and beyond Danone. Janet has played a central role in catalyzing and developing the Danone approach to regenerative agriculture and methane reduction, as well as flagship initiatives such as Business for Inclusive Growth or One Planet Business for Biodiversity. She also leads the company journey towards global B Corporate certification with the ambition to make Danone the largest certificate B Corporate in the world by 2025. So the floor is yours, Janet.
Thank you so much. And how many minutes do I have? I just want to make sure that I'm on time because I can adapt if you want me to go fast.
1 minute less, that'll be okay?
All right. Okay, great. Yeah, thank you so much. Really happy to be here today. And thank you to IDF for its leadership and also its partnership, especially lately as we move into this sustainable dairy, we lean into that. So if you go to the next slide, and then go to the next one, and one more. Perfect. So I think many of you know Danone, but maybe you don't know the origin story of Danone, which I think is really powerful. So we're over 100 years old. And actually the company started, there was a man, Isaac Carasso, who is the founder, who immigrated from Greece to Spain over 100 years ago. And he was really shocked by the malnutrition, and particularly the malnutrition of children. And so he was an entrepreneur, and he had this idea, and he started marketing and selling dairy products, yogurt, but in pharmacies. So it really did start out as a company with a mission to drive health through dairy and through food. So 100 years later, and we've talked a lot about the the expanded notion of health, I think we're in a different place. Still, the nutritional component is critical, but also the planetary health is becoming, of course, just absolutely existential. So we have a vision now that says one planet, one health, because we recognize that the two are completely intertwined. If you go to the next slide. You probably know that we're a leader in dairy, but we're also a leader in plant-based. And we have a waters division and also a specialized nutrition. So this is medical nutrition and early life nutrition categories as well. And B Corp is mentioned. So we have we've for a very long time now, over 50 years, we've had this what we call a dual project for economic growth, but also social progress. And that's embodied today by the fact that we are an enterprise, a mission company, a mission enterprise, and also that we are trying to be the world's largest B Corp in 2025. We're present. We have a global reach, and also the three top brands are still dairy brands. So we're still really proud to be a dairy leader. If you move to the next slide. So we have this a kind of holistic vision for sustainability, for sustainable growth of our business. And this is around 3 pillars. It's around, of course, health, still with the mission to bring health through food to as many people as possible. It's around this community dimension, which is actually, we try to put at the center of everything, to be very people-centered. And it's around nature, preserving and regenerating nature. And I will focus in on that for just a minute. So we're here at the COP. It's a climate crisis. And a couple of years ago, we had been focusing on emission reduction in dairy for many years. We started measuring our GHG emissions in 2008. We said we wanted to be net zero in 2015, so this is a pretty long journey. But a couple of years ago, I think it was in 2021, the methane topic started to rise because we had these scientific reports. We had the COP26 and the Global Methane Pledge, and Danone started to get a lot of questions from investors, from NGOs, from employees, and we saw actually governments moving. And so this set off a kind of discussion internally in the company, and we formed, it was pretty informal, but we had a kind of cross-functional group with our dairy business, our external relations. I was in this discussion, and then also our ag team, our agriculture team. And in the beginning, I have to say that we really saw this as a risk. We were saying, okay, how do we mitigate this risk? There's a regulatory risk, there's a reputational risk, what do we do? And then we started seeing it differently. Little by little, I think we started seeing it as an opportunity. And so this year, in January, we set a methane-specific reduction target. So we're targeting a 30% reduction of methane emissions from fresh milk between 2020 and 2030. And we did this for a number of reasons, and again, linked to what we ended up seeing as an opportunity. The first was linked to reputation. And I think our dairy business saw very clearly, look, we're concerned, we're starting to get this association that we think is really problematic and we're worried about consumers going this direction between cow and climate. We must stop this. We must change the conversation. So reputation among consumers, also with governments. We started, seeing that, okay, governments are looking now, the conversations are not always going in the right direction. And so we need to kind of see this as an opportunity and help guide them. And so we saw an opportunity in that reputational space to actually frame dairy as a climate solution, which we think it is, and to help governments and to help consumers eat more sustainably. So it was a reputational component. It was also, I think, a resource mobilization component, because what we started seeing is if governments really care, philanthropic groups are starting to come together. There's money, and there's money for farmers, and we need money for farmers. We have some resources, but we don't have all the resources we need. So we need to kind of think about this as a way to start mobilizing more resources across sector to channel it to the farmers who need it to drive the change. And the final dimension was this dimension of resilience, and resilience of farmers, and therefore resilience of our business, because if we don't have farmers, we don't have a business. So that was the last kind of component, and we recognized to the point that some of the methane solutions really are linked with farm resilience, with farm sustainability and profitability, especially if you see it holistically. And when it's not, we need to make them that way. So we saw it as like a very important topic for resilience. So we set this target, and if you go to the next slide, and the next one, sorry, I have a lot of intro slides. So, so what does that look like in practice? So we have different levers. I think you probably know them. This is not news to you. We have manure management, herd management, feed management, and then we have these kind of breakthrough innovation piece. But what we're trying to do now is we're really trying to lean into the work that we've already started doing. And so we're proud we have a Dairy Innovation Winner project in North Africa, in Algeria. We've had this project that, that's been going on for a few years now, but that's helped work with 1,400 dairy farmers on transitioning to regenerative and climate smart practices. And what's really encouraging about these projects, at least from our perspective, is that they really do have this triple win. So, you know, we've seen concrete improvements in milk quality, in milk fat, critically in yield, because that is the #1 lever we have, to your point, for methane reduction. And so yield going from 12 to over 17 liters. And then, of course, especially since we're improving yield, better income and for farmers. And then you get the environmental benefits. So we've seen a 5% decrease, but that's in a little over 1 year. So that's pretty significant. So we've seen that these projects really work and have potential, and we need to scale them. So if you go to the next slide. And the next one, sorry, again. Yeah, so we're trying, we have projects in 15 countries on working on dairy transition, and there are really kind of areas that are especially critical. And one of them is in Africa, and particularly North Africa, where we have a pretty big business, and that's linked to a number of factors that's making this, you know, really, again, existential. Population growth, and so more need for dairy, climate change really impacting food systems. We've seen, you know, and I think there are other research that shows this, but what a minute, okay. Between 5 and 15% drop in milk productivity linked to heat stress, linked to, you know, the water availability. So absolutely critical. We're looking to scale that. So we've got 13,000 farmers across these regions, but we need to go much further. So we're really looking to mobilize the resources and the partnerships. If you go to the next slide, and the next one. Thank you. This is the last one. So, so a couple of, I wouldn't say these are calls to action. These are calls for really collaboration, joint collaboration. So the first thing we see, and you know, there are encouraging signs, is again this question about mobilizing public resources. And the great news is, I mean, we have robust collaboration. We're working with governments in Africa, in the US. We've great partnership with the Climate Smart Commodities program, where we're helping channel investments for manure management to dairy farmers. But we need to go a lot further. So we hope this COP will be an opportunity, and that we can point this in the right direction and show that we need this kind of triple win for farmers, for resilience, for the planet, and also for, of course, nutrition. And so the pre-competitive, the collective approach is also really important. We've seen some of the barriers to our acceleration on methane reduction, linked to measurement, linked to kind of navigating the innovation landscape, linked to the financing. And so we're excited today, later today at 3:30, there's going to be a session on methane where we're going to announce a Dairy Methane Action Alliance with other dairy companies. And you know, we've talked a lot about this to IDF, and we're excited, and we think, you know, this is a start. We need to, it's not a new coalition, it's basically a collective sprint, and we need to figure out how to collectively troubleshoot, because as Danone, we're having trouble, you know, answering all the questions by ourselves. And then the final question is these public-private partnerships, not just with public, but also with philanthropic. So one more thing that I'll mention, and we're excited about, is the Global Methane Hub. You've probably heard about it. And we just joined the Global Methane Hub. They've just launched their enteric accelerator. So that's $200 million going to breakthrough methane research and innovation to lower the cost, to make sure that these solutions are available, not just for a few farmers, but for all farmers everywhere. Thank you very much.
Inspiring story from our colleague, Mrs. Amadista Chequera. She's the founder and lead innovation in Passion Poultry. They work with skilled poultry farmers by designing, manufacturing, and distributing off-the-grid chicks brooding device and poultry slaughtering device. She was introduced in the poultry industry by her parents at the age of 10, And currently, she's the Provincial Zimbabwe Farmer Union Youth Leader. And in 2019, she was granted 2 patents in the form of utility models by IRIPO for her 2 poultry equipment innovation. So the last few words are yours, and if you can give me 30 seconds to conclude, that'd be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So my daughter turned 6 months in October. We took her to the pediatrician so that we can introduce solids properly to her. And the doctor highlighted that she needed iron. And it made me happy because the source of protein that she needed, she emphasized that we give her chickens, chicken liver, and eggs. And I felt that she was very fortunate because I'm an entrepreneur as well as an expert in this industry. Unfortunately, a number of children in Zimbabwe do not have access to this type of protein. Hence, the government introduced the inclusive poultry value chain. But in the process, we realized that they are cutting down trees so that they can keep their chicks warm during the brooding period. As a result of this, I introduced an innovation to keep the chicks warm. It's called the chick brooding device, and currently it's reducing chick mortality rate by 95%, thereby increasing the profits of these farmers, as well as making sure we are enabling a sustainable environment through this innovation. So from this innovation, it can be noticed that farmers can create innovations to sustain themselves. Thank you.
I can give you another minute.
Or should I go on?
I can give you another minute. I'm generous.
Okay. So as the government of Zimbabwe was introducing the inclusive poultry value chain, the uptake of chicken also increased. And it meant that farmers were also increasing deforestation because they needed charcoal to keep their chicks warm. Because of this, I took it to account that I go out and research how we can make sure that these farmers do not continue cutting down trees. I went to neighboring countries to learn about what is known as the biomass briquettes, which is a green alternative to charcoal, and came up with the chick brooding innovation called the chick brooder, made up of 3 components, that is the brooder ring, the heater, as well as the heat reflector. It's powered by the biomass briquette, which we make from farm waste, that is maize stalks, groundnut shells, as well as maize stalk. So from this presentation, you notice that farmers can actually be innovative in terms of figuring out their challenges and coming out with solution, just like I did, so that they gain enough profits, as well as make sure the environment is sustainable. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We had a very ambitious program, so as usual, a lot of time for questions. So you have our email address here, so please do submit your question. We'd be more than happy to answer by email. I would like to thank all of our speakers in Dubai and in Rome for their participation. I want to thank you as well for being here. I would like to leave you, I had the whole conclusion, but I think what I want to say first is that nutrition, security, and climate action are both priorities, and they must be addressed together. Animal source foods such as dairy can play an important role for both. And as you see in both the case of India and Danone, it is possible to actually provide nutrition as well as doing better in terms of sustainability and climate action. So on that, farmers matter, context matters, and actually thank you all for contributing to this better world. Thank you.